The bathroom mirror reflected more than just an image. It reflected years of humiliation, malicious whispers, and looks of contempt. Isabella Martinez, at 24 years old, knew every inch of her body like a map of lost battles. Her generous curves, which should have been a source of pride, had become her greatest source of shame in a society obsessed with impossible standards. "Isabella, get down here now!" Her father's harsh voice echoed through the modest house in suburban Chicago, cutting through the Tuesday morning silence like a sharp blade. She sighed deeply, adjusting the black blouse she had carefully chosen to disguise her figure. Every piece of clothing in her wardrobe was strategically selected. Dark colors, loose cuts, everything to become invisible in a world that made her feel constantly watched and judged. Descending the creaking stairs of the two-story house where she had grown up, Isabella found her father, Roberto Martinez, sitting at the kitchen table with an expression darker than usual. At 52, Roberto carried the weight of a life of questionable decisions and debts that accumulated like storm clouds on the horizon. "Sit down," he ordered, without lifting his eyes from the already cold coffee in his stained mug. Isabella obeyed, feeling the familiar tightness in her stomach that always accompanied these tense conversations. Her mother, Carmen, remained standing by the stove, nervously stirring an empty pot, a habit she had developed when anxious. "Dad, if this is about the office job, I already told you that." "It's not about any job," Roberto interrupted her brusquely. "It's about you finally being useful for something in this family." The words hit Isabella like a punch to the stomach. She was used to her father's cruel comments about her appearance, but the coldness in his voice at that moment was different. There was a finality there that frightened her. "Roberto, please," Carmen murmured from the stove, her tremulous voice revealing that she knew exactly what this was about. "Shut up, Carmen. You know very well we have no choice." Roberto finally raised his eyes to Isabella, and she saw something she had never seen before. Desperation mixed with cruel determination. "You're going to get married." Isabella felt the world spinning around her. "Married? To whom? Dad, I'm not even dating anyone, and—" "To Vincent Romano." The name fell over the kitchen like a bomb. Isabella knew this name. Everyone in Chicago knew it. Vincent Romano was a legendary figure in the city, a powerful businessman whose enterprises extended throughout the metropolitan region. There were rumors, of course, whispers about connections with organizations that operated in the shadows, about unconventional methods of solving business problems. "Have you lost your mind?" Isabella stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "I'm not going to marry a stranger, much less someone like Vincent Romano." Roberto also stood up, his face red with anger. "You'll do exactly what I'm telling you. Do you think you have a choice? Do you think any decent man would want a woman like you?" Each word was a stab. Isabella felt hot tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not anymore. "A woman like me?" she repeated, her voice trembling with indignation. "What exactly is wrong with me, Dad? Look at yourself." Roberto gestured violently in her direction. "You're fat, Isabella. No man wants a fat woman. You're already 24 and have never even brought a boyfriend home. Do you think that's normal?" Carmen finally turned from the stove, tears streaming down her face. "Roberto, stop this. She's our daughter." "She's a burden," he shouted back. "A burden that's finally going to be useful for something. Vincent Romano needs a wife, and I need my debts to him to be forgiven. It's a fair trade." The reality of the situation hit Isabella like a tsunami. Her own father was literally selling her to settle his debts. She wasn't a daughter to him. She was merchandise, an object to be negotiated. "Your debts?" she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "You're selling me because of your gambling debts?" Roberto looked away, unable to face his daughter's eyes. "It's not selling. It's marriage. Vincent is a powerful, rich man. You'll have a better life than you could ever have here." "A better life?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "Being forced to marry a man I've never seen in my life? A man who's probably only accepting this because you're desperate enough to offer your own daughter as payment?" The truth behind Isabella's words was even more painful than she imagined. Vincent Romano had, in fact, accepted Roberto's proposal not out of romantic interest, but from a mixture of pragmatism and curiosity. At 35, Vincent was a man who had built an empire through calculated decisions and strategic alliances. Marriage to Isabella would be beneficial for his public image, showing that he was a family man, stable, trustworthy. But there was something more. When Roberto had mentioned that his daughter was different from the standard, that she wasn't like the other women who usually orbited around men in his position, Vincent felt genuine curiosity. He was tired of superficial women who were only interested in his money and status. Perhaps a woman who didn't fit conventional beauty standards could offer something more substantial. Back in the Martinez kitchen, Isabella felt as if she were watching her life crumble in slow motion. Everything she had fought for, her education, her dreams of independence, her dignity, was being thrown away by a man who should protect her. When? She asked, her voice now cold and distant. Next week, Roberto replied, avoiding her gaze. Vincent wants to meet you first. There will be a dinner at his house tomorrow night. Isabella nodded slowly, a strange calm taking over her. It was as if a part of her had disconnected from reality, creating a protective barrier against the overwhelming pain. All right, she said simply. Roberto seemed surprised by the lack of resistance. All right? Yes, Dad. All right. Isabella headed for the kitchen door, stopping only to look back one last time. But I want you to know something. From today on, you no longer have a daughter. You have a business transaction. And when that transaction is complete, I never want to see you in my life again. With those words, Isabella went up to her room, closing the door with a softness that somehow was more final than any violent slam could have been. Alone in her room, surrounded by memories of a childhood that now seemed to belong to someone else, Isabella finally allowed the tears to fall. But they weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of mourning. She was crying for the death of the girl who once believed she would be loved unconditionally by her family, who would one day find someone who would see her beyond her physical appearance. As night fell over Chicago, Isabella Martinez prepared to meet Vincent Romano, the man who would be her husband not for love, but for necessity. She had no idea that this meeting would change her life in ways she could never imagine, and that the man who should be her perdition would become her salvation. The cold October wind beat against her window, as if the city itself were whispering that changes were coming. And somewhere on the other side of the city, in an elegant mansion in Lincoln Park, Vincent Romano was also preparing to meet the woman who would become his wife, not knowing that she would be much more than he had ever expected to find. Vincent Romano's mansion in Lincoln Park was a silent statement of power and sophistication. Built in classic Georgian style, with red bricks and tall windows framed by black shutters, the property rose majestically among meticulously maintained gardens. Isabella observed the imposing structure through the taxi window, feeling her stomach twist into increasingly tight knots. "Here we are, miss," said the driver, an elderly man with an Irish accent who had tried to maintain a friendly conversation throughout the trip, apparently oblivious to his passenger's emotional state. Isabella paid the fare with trembling hands and got out of the vehicle, the cold October wind cutting through her navy blue dress, the only more formal piece she owned, and which still made her feel uncomfortable and exposed. She had spent hours getting ready, not out of vanity, but from a desperate need to feel minimally prepared for what was to come. The wrought iron gate opened automatically as she approached, revealing a stone path that wound through a garden where late roses still bloomed despite the season. Each step toward the main door seemed to echo like a countdown to the end of her freedom. Before she could even touch the doorbell, the massive oak door opened, revealing a tall, elegant man dressed in an impeccable suit. His dark hair had silver strands at the temples, and his eyes, a deep blue like the ocean during a storm, studied her with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see directly into her soul. "Isabella Martinez," he said, and his voice was softer than she expected, rich and deep, but without the harshness she had imagined finding in a man of his reputation. "Mr. Romano," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the whirlwind of emotions she felt. Vincent stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Please, call me Vincent, and you must be cold." October in Chicago can be merciless. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. The entrance hall featured a high ceiling with a curved staircase that seemed straight out of a classic Hollywood movie. Crystal chandeliers cast warm, welcoming light over antique furniture that had clearly been chosen with care and good taste. "Your house is beautiful," Isabella commented, and it was a genuine observation. Despite her circumstances, she couldn't help but appreciate the elegance of the environment. "Thank you. I inherited it from my grandfather, but I've made some renovations over the years." Vincent guided her through a corridor adorned with paintings that appeared to be originals. "I hope you like Italian food. My cook, Sophia, prepared something special for tonight." Isabella nodded, surprised by the genuine courtesy in his voice. She had prepared to meet a cold and calculating man, someone who would treat her like a business obligation. Instead, Vincent Romano seemed human. They entered an intimate dining room, much smaller than Isabella expected for a house of that size. The table was set for 2 people, with lit candles and fresh flowers as a centerpiece. It was romantic in a way that made her feel even more out of place. "Please, sit down," Vincent said, pulling out a chair for her with the naturalness of someone accustomed to treating people with courtesy. As she sat, Isabella couldn't help but notice how he moved. There was a controlled grace in his gestures, a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from years of experience navigating complex situations. He was undeniably attractive, but in a mature and sophisticated way that intimidated her. "Wine?" he offered, holding a bottle of red that looked expensive. Yes, thank you." Isabella rarely drank, but felt she needed something to calm her nerves. Vincent served the wine with precise movements, and she noticed his hands, strong but careful, with a small scar on the back of his right hand that spoke of a life that hadn't always been privileged. "Isabella," he began, sitting across from her, "I imagine this situation is uncomfortable for you." The direct honesty caught her off guard. She had prepared for word games, for superficial conversations that would dance around the truth. "Uncomfortable is a mild word to describe being sold by your own father," she replied, surprising herself with her own frankness. Vincent nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Your father approached me with a proposal. He was desperate. Desperate men make choices that sometimes hurt the people they should protect." "And you? Why did you accept?" Isabella asked, finding courage in her own indignation. "Surely a man in your position doesn't have difficulty finding interested women." An almost imperceptible smile touched Vincent's lips. "You're right. I don't have difficulty finding women interested in my money, my status, my influence. But finding someone interested in me, that's rarer." The answer surprised her. There was a subtle vulnerability in his words that didn't match the image she had built of him in her mind. Sophia, the cook, appeared with the first course, a delicate appetizer of bruschetta with fresh tomatoes and basil. The middle-aged Italian woman smiled warmly at Isabella, saying something in Italian to Vincent that made her blush slightly. "Sophia said you're very beautiful," Vincent translated, and there was something in his voice that suggested he agreed with the assessment. Isabella almost choked on her wine. "Beautiful?" she repeated, unable to hide the incredulity in her voice. "You seem surprised." Well, yes. It's not exactly something I hear frequently." Isabella lowered her eyes to her plate, feeling the familiar heat of shame rising up her neck. Vincent was silent for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "May I ask who told you that you're not beautiful?" The question hit her like lightning. "Everyone," she replied automatically, then corrected herself. "I mean, no one needs to say it directly, it's obvious." "Obvious to whom?" Isabella raised her eyes, meeting his. There was something in his expression, a seriousness that made her feel as if her words really mattered to him. "To anyone with eyes," she said, gesturing vaguely toward her own body. "I don't fit what society considers attractive. I'm fat, Vincent. There's no way around it." "You're right," Vincent said, and Isabella felt her heart sink. "You don't fit the conventional beauty standards that our society promotes. But have you ever stopped to question whether those standards make any sense?" Isabella blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Vincent leaned slightly forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I mean that real beauty, true beauty, has nothing to do with size or shape. It has to do with the light in a person's eyes when they talk about something they love. It has to do with the strength they show when facing adversity. It has to do with the kindness they show, even when the world hasn't been kind to them. Isabella felt tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way, as if she were more than just her physical appearance. "You don't know me," she whispered. "How can you say these things?" "You're right, I don't know you yet, but I can see things. I can see that you came here tonight despite being clearly terrified. I can see that you look me in the eyes when you speak, even when it's difficult. I can see that you have pride, dignity, courage." Vincent paused, taking a sip of wine. "Those are qualities I admire much more than a small waist." Dinner continued, and gradually Isabella found herself relaxing. Vincent was a skilled conversationalist, asking questions about her interests, her dreams, her opinions on books and movies. He listened, really listened, in a way she wasn't used to. "You studied literature at Northwestern," he observed when she mentioned her love for classic books. "That's impressive. I've always admired people who understand the power of words." "I didn't finish," Isabella admitted. "My father said it was a waste of time and money, that I should focus on finding a husband instead of filling my head with nonsense." Vincent frowned. "What a waste. Education is never a waste of time, especially for a clearly intelligent mind like yours." When Sophia brought dessert, a tiramisu that looked like a work of art, Isabella realized she had spent the last 2 hours conversing naturally with Vincent, almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought them together. "Isabella," Vincent said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I need to be honest with you about something." Her stomach tightened again. "What?" "I accepted your father's proposal, yes, but not for the reasons you might imagine." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm tired of being alone, tired of superficial relationships with women who only see what I can offer materially. When your father mentioned that you were different, I was curious." "Different?" Isabella repeated bitterly. "That's a polite way of saying fat and undesirable." "No," Vincent said firmly. "It's a way of saying real, genuine, not corrupted by the superficial expectations that dominate my world." Isabella studied him, looking for signs of falsehood, of manipulation, but all she saw was sincerity. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Vincent took a deep breath. "I'm proposing that we give ourselves a chance, not as a business transaction, but as two people who might be able to find something real together. No pressure, no unrealistic expectations, just a chance. And if it doesn't work, then you'll be free to leave, with enough resources to restart your life wherever you want, finish your studies, follow your dreams." Vincent leaned forward. "But Isabella, I would very much like it to work." Isabella felt as if she were on the edge of a precipice. Behind her was the life she knew, full of rejection, humiliation, and limitations. Ahead was the unknown, represented by a man who had treated her with more respect in one night than her own family had in years. "Why me?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Vincent smiled, the first genuine and complete smile she had seen from him all evening. "Because when you walked through my door tonight, you didn't look around calculating the value of everything you saw, because you looked me in the eyes when you spoke, even though you were nervous. Because you have a quiet strength that's more attractive than any conventional beauty." He paused. "And because when you smile, really smile, your eyes light up in a way that makes everything around you more beautiful." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll think about it," Vincent said softly. "Say you'll give me a chance to prove that not all men are like your father." Isabella nodded slowly, unable to speak. When Vincent walked her to the door later that night, he gently touched her arm. "Isabella, I want you to know something. Regardless of what you decide, you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." As the taxi took her back home, Isabella looked out the window at the lights of Chicago, passing like blurred stars. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, a future where she could be valued not despite who she was, but exactly because of who she was. Vincent Romano had planted a seed of possibility in her heart, and Isabella discovered that against all expectations, she wanted to see that seed grow. The 3 days following the dinner passed like an eternity for Isabella. She found herself reliving every moment, every word, every look that Vincent had given her. It was as if someone had turned on a light in a room that had remained in darkness for years, and now she was struggling to adjust to the brightness. The Martinez house seemed smaller and more suffocating than ever. Roberto barely spoke to her, limiting himself to brusque questions about when she would give an answer to Mr. Romano. Carmen tried to maintain an appearance of normalcy, but Isabella could see the guilt weighing on her mother's shoulders like an invisible cloak. On Thursday morning, Isabella was sitting in her room, looking out the window at the small backyard garden where she used to play as a child, when her phone rang. The number was unknown, but something in her heart already knew who it was. "Hello?" she answered, her voice more hesitant than intended. "Isabella? It's Vincent." His voice sounded even richer over the phone, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "I hope you don't mind that I got your number from your father." "No, it's fine," she replied, sitting up straighter on the bed. "I was thinking, if you're still considering my proposal, perhaps you'd like to get to know me better before making a decision. How about lunch today? Somewhere public where you'd feel comfortable?" Isabella hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, the part that had been hurt so many times, whispered warnings about trusting too quickly. Yes, I'd like that," she finally replied. "Great. I know a small Italian cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, just a place where we can talk. May I pick you up at noon?" 2 hours later, Isabella found herself sitting in the front seat of an elegant black Mercedes, watching Vincent drive through the busy streets of Chicago. He had traded his formal suits for a light blue shirt and dark pants, still elegant but more approachable. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing how she played with her purse strap. "A little," she admitted. "I'm not used to this." "To what?" "To being courted, I guess, if that's what's happening." Isabella blushed as she realized what she had said. Vincent smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. "That's exactly what's happening, Isabella, and I hope you get used to it because I intend to do this right." The cafe Vincent chose was a small family establishment in Chicago's Little Italy. The aroma of garlic, basil, and fresh bread enveloped the environment like a warm embrace. They sat at a small table near the window where they could watch people passing on the street. "This place has belonged to the Benedetti family for 3 generations, Vincent explained as they studied the menu. "Nonna Benedetti still makes the pasta by hand every morning." "How do you know this place?" Isabella asked, genuinely curious. Vincent hesitated for a moment as if deciding how much to reveal. "My family didn't always have money, Isabella. I grew up not far from here, in a small apartment above a bakery. My mother used to bring me here on my birthdays when she could afford it." The revelation surprised her. "I didn't know. I always thought you were born with a silver spoon." "Many people think that. It's easier to let them think that than explain how I really built what I have." Vincent took a sip of water. "But with you, I want to be honest about everything." During lunch, Vincent told more about his life. How he had lost his father at 12. How his mother had worked 2 jobs to support them. How he had started selling newspapers on street corners and gradually built an empire through determination, intelligence, and yes, some morally ambiguous decisions. "I'm not a saint, Isabella," he said, cutting his risotto with precise movements. "I've done things I'm not proud of to get where I am, but I've never hurt innocent people, never broken a promise, and always protected those who were important to me." Isabella listened, fascinated. There was a raw honesty in his words that touched her deeply. "Why are you telling me this?" "Most people would try to hide these things, because if we're going to make this work, you need to know exactly who you're getting involved with. I don't want you to marry me based on illusions." Vincent leaned forward. and because you deserve the truth. After lunch, they walked through Millennium Park. It was a surprisingly warm October day, and the trees were painted with golden and red autumn tones. Isabella found herself relaxing more with each step, the conversation flowing naturally between them. "May I ask about your family?" Vincent said as they sat on a bench near Cloud Gate. Isabella sighed. "There's not much to say. My father has always seen me as a disappointment. My mother, she tries, but was never strong enough to defend me." She paused. Growing up in a house where you feel you're a constant burden, that marks a person. Vincent nodded slowly. "I understand more than you imagine. After my father died, some relatives treated us as if we were an obligation, as if our presence was an inconvenient reminder that life isn't always fair." They remained silent for a moment, watching people pass by, families with children, couples holding hands, tourists taking photos. It was a reminder that the world was full of people living their normal lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding between them. "Vincent," Isabella finally said, "may I ask something personal? Anything. Have you ever been married before? Seriously dated?" Vincent hesitated, and Isabella saw a shadow pass through his eyes. There was someone a few years ago, Elena. She was everything you'd expect a woman in my position to be. Beautiful, sophisticated, from a good family. What happened? I discovered she was cheating on me with my business partner. Apparently they thought I was too dangerous to be a suitable husband, but my money was perfectly acceptable. Vincent laughed bitterly. It was a valuable lesson about the difference between love and convenience. Isabella felt a pang of anger on his behalf. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was, but it also taught me to value authenticity above all else." He turned to look at her directly. "That's why you intrigue me so much, Isabella. You're genuine in a way that's rare in my world." When Vincent dropped her off at home that afternoon, Isabella felt as if she were living someone else's life. For the first time, a man had been interested in her thoughts, her opinions, her dreams. He had treated her as an equal, not as an object of pity or contempt. That night, she found herself in front of the mirror again. But this time, she didn't see only flaws. She saw the eyes that Vincent had said lit up when she smiled. She saw the hands he had held gently when helping her out of the car. She saw a woman who perhaps, just perhaps, was worthy of being loved. The next morning, Isabella made her decision. She called Vincent before even having breakfast, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed the number. "Isabella," he answered on the second ring, as if he had been waiting for her call. "Vincent, I would like to accept your proposal." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a terrible moment Isabella thought he had changed his mind. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. And there was something in his voice, relief, perhaps, or hope. "I'm sure," she replied. And for the first time in years, she really was. "Then let's do this right," Vincent said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "How about dinner tonight? There's something I want to give you." That night, Vincent appeared at the Martinez door with a bouquet of white roses and a small blue velvet box. Roberto opened the door, his servile attitude in stark contrast to how he treated his own daughter. "Mr. Romano, come in, please. Isabella will be ready in a minute." But Isabella was already coming down the stairs, wearing the same navy blue dress from the first night, but this time feeling completely different. She felt beautiful, not because she had changed physically, but because someone had helped her see herself through kind eyes. "You look beautiful," Vincent said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart race. In the car, he handed her the small box. "This belonged to my grandmother. She always said it should go to the woman who captured my heart." Isabella opened the box with trembling fingers, revealing a delicate ring with a blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. It was elegant without being ostentatious, classic without being outdated. "Vincent, it's beautiful, but I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "If you're going to be my wife, I want it to be because you chose to be, not because you were forced. This ring represents a choice, Isabella. Your choice." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, Isabella felt as if she were crossing a bridge between her old life and a new life full of possibilities she had never dared imagine. "There's something I need to tell you," she said while admiring the ring on her hand. "What is it?" I've never been with a man before. Romantically, I mean." Isabella blushed deeply. "I know you probably expected someone more experienced." Vincent gently pulled the car over to the shoulder and turned to look at her completely. "Isabella, look at me." She reluctantly raised her eyes. "This doesn't change anything for me. In fact, it makes everything more special. It means that when we're ready, when you're ready, it will be something we build together." He gently touched her face. "There's no rush, no pressure. We have all the time in the world." In that moment, sitting in the car with Vincent, wearing his grandmother's ring, Isabella knew she had made the right decision. She was marrying not out of obligation, but out of hope, not out of desperation, but out of possibility. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that she deserved to be happy. Isabella and Vincent's wedding took place in an intimate ceremony in the garden of his mansion, 3 weeks after the engagement. It was a surprisingly sunny Saturday in November, as if the universe itself were blessing their union. Only a few people were present: Carmen Martinez, who cried throughout the entire ceremony, some of Vincent's close associates, and Sofia, the cook, who had become a maternal figure to Isabella in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Roberto Martinez did not attend. When Vincent asked about the father's absence, Isabella simply said, "He already did his part in the transaction. There's no need for his presence here." Vincent didn't insist on the matter. Isabella wore a simple champagne-colored silk dress that Vincent had specially made for her. For the first time in her life, she felt truly beautiful, not because the dress disguised her figure, but because it had been created to celebrate her exactly as she was. "You look radiant," Vincent whispered when they met at the improvised altar under an arch of white roses. "I'm nervous," she admitted, her hands trembling slightly as she held the bouquet of white lilies. "So am I," he confessed, and this surprised her. Vincent Romano, the man who commanded business meetings with the confidence of a general, was nervous to marry her. The vows they exchanged were simple, but loaded with meaning. When Vincent promised to honor her, protect her, and value her every day of his life, Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. When she promised to trust him, support him, and grow alongside him, Vincent squeezed her hands as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The honeymoon was spent at the mansion itself. Vincent had suggested a trip to Italy or France, but Isabella confessed she preferred to stay home, gradually getting used to her new life. He understood perfectly, as he always seemed to do. The first months of marriage were a constant revelation for Isabella. Vincent kept his word about there being no pressure. They slept in separate rooms, and he never did anything that made her uncomfortable. Instead, he dedicated himself to truly knowing her. He discovered that she loved reading in the garden during Sunday mornings, so he had a reading bench installed under the century-old oak tree. When he learned she had abandoned her studies, he discreetly inquired about distance education programs and left the brochures on her desk without pressure, just as an option. "You don't need to do this," Isabella said one morning, finding him reading the newspapers in the breakfast room that had become their favorite place for morning meals. "Do what?" he asked, lowering the Wall Street Journal. "Be so thoughtful. I know this marriage isn't exactly conventional." Vincent folded the newspaper completely and looked at her with that intensity that still made her blush. "Isabella, may I tell you something about myself?" She nodded, serving herself coffee from the silver coffee pot that Sophia always left prepared. "I could have married any of dozens of women over the years, women who would have been suitable wives on paper, but I chose you." He leaned forward. "Not because your father offered me a convenient proposal, but because in one night you showed me more authenticity than I had found in years of superficial relationships. But I'm not what people would expect for someone like you." "Exactly," Vincent interrupted her. "You're not what they would expect. You're better." It was during the 3rd month of marriage that Isabella began to notice changes in herself. Not physical, although she had begun to dress more carefully, choosing more vibrant colors instead of always hiding in black, but deeper changes. She began to express her opinions more freely. When Vincent mentioned considering investing in a restaurant chain, Isabella suggested he visit the establishments during different hours to get a real view of operations. When he followed her advice and discovered serious management problems that the financial reports didn't reveal, he looked at her with genuine admiration. "How did you know?" he asked that night during dinner. "My first job was at a restaurant during high school," she explained. "I learned there's a big difference between how a place works on paper and how it works in reality. You should consider going back to study business administration," Vincent suggested. "You have a natural instinct for business." Isabella had begun to seriously consider resuming her studies. The idea of finishing her degree, something that had seemed impossible just months before, now seemed not only viable but desirable. It was during one of these conversations about education that Isabella realized something surprising. She was happy, not just content or grateful, but genuinely happy. For the first time in her adult life, she woke up looking forward to the day ahead. The transformation didn't go unnoticed by others. Carmen, who visited occasionally, commented on how Isabella seemed different, more confident, more radiant. Sophia, who had become a confidant, said she had never seen Vincent so relaxed and genuinely smiling. He was a good man before, Sophia explained in her English seasoned with Italian accent, while teaching Isabella to make her famous lasagna. But he was a lonely man. "You brought light to this house." The real proof of Isabella's transformation came on an April night, 6 months after the wedding. Vincent had been invited to an important charity event, the kind of social function where his presence was expected and his absence would be noticed. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror of his room. "I know these events can be intimidating." Isabella, who was getting ready in her room, stopped applying lipstick and looked at him through the mirror. "Why wouldn't I want to accompany my husband to an important event?" Vincent turned to look at her directly. "Because I know how these people can be. They'll judge you, make comments, try to make you feel like you don't belong in my world." Isabella stood up, smoothing the dark blue dress she had chosen. Elegant, sophisticated, and that made her feel powerful. "Vincent, 6 months ago I would have agreed with you. I would have hidden here, afraid of what people would think." She walked to him. "But I'm no longer that woman." "No?" "No. Now I'm Vincent Romano's wife, and anyone who has a problem with that can deal with their own insecurities." Vincent looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was pride mixed with something deeper, more intense. "My God, Isabella," he whispered, "you're magnificent." The event was exactly as Vincent had predicted. There were looks, whispers, veiled comments about Vincent Romano's interesting choice. But Isabella navigated through all of this with a grace that surprised even herself, when a particularly venomous woman commented loudly enough to be heard that, "Some men certainly have unique tastes." Isabella simply smiled and replied, "Yes, my husband has always had excellent judgment. That's why he's so successful in everything he does." Vincent, who had heard the exchange, approached and put his arm around Isabella's waist with a gesture that was clearly possessive and proud. "Gentlemen," he said to the group of men he was talking with, "I'd like you to meet my wife, Isabella. She's considering returning to university to study business administration. I'm sure she'll be a valuable addition to the business world." The way he introduced her, not as an accessory, but as a person with her own merits and ambitions, made Isabella's heart race. Later that night, when they were returning home, Vincent broke the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "You were incredible tonight." "Thank you. I felt incredible." Isabella looked out the window at the lights of Chicago passing by. "It's strange, you know. For so long I let other people define my worth. But tonight, for the first time, I knew exactly who I was and what my place was." "And what is your place?" Vincent asked softly. Isabella turned to look at him, seeing his profile illuminated by the streetlights. "By your side, as your equal, your partner, your wife." Vincent gently pulled the car over to the shoulder and turned to look at her completely. There was something in his eyes that made her heart race, an intensity she had seen growing over the months, but which now seemed to have reached a boiling point. "Isabella," he said, his voice hoarse, "may I kiss you?" It was the first time he had asked. During all the months of marriage, they had shared chaste kisses, gentle hugs, but nothing that suggested the passion she could see burning in his eyes at that moment. "Yes," she whispered. When his lips touched hers, Isabella felt as if the entire world had caught fire. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a declaration, a recognition that something fundamental had changed between them. When they separated, both were breathing heavily. "Isabella," Vincent whispered, gently touching her face, "I love you." The words hit her like lightning. "You? What? I love you." I don't know exactly when it happened. Whether it was the first night when you looked me in the eyes and refused to be intimidated, or if it was gradually seeing you blossom and become the incredible woman you always were inside. But I love you, Isabella. Completely, irrevocably, forever. Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, Vincent. I love you so much it sometimes hurts." That night, for the first time, they didn't separate at the stairway. Vincent gently took Isabella's hand and guided her to his room, which would now be their room. And when they made love for the first time, it was with the tenderness of two people who had found not just passion, but something much rarer and more precious, a true and deep love built on mutual respect, genuine admiration, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. Isabella fell asleep in Vincent's arms that night, knowing she had found not just a husband, but a life partner who saw her exactly as she was and loved her not despite her imperfections, but including all of them. The woman who had been delivered as payment for a debt had transformed into the beloved wife of a powerful man, not through external changes, but through the discovery of her own inner strength and inherent worth. 2 years had passed since that transformative night in the car, and Isabella's life had become something she had never dared to dream. She was sitting in her home office, the space that Vincent had created especially for her when she decided to resume her studies, reviewing her master's thesis in business administration. Yes, she hadn't only finished her undergraduate degree, but had also enrolled in a master's program, with Vincent supporting every step of her academic journey. The sound of familiar footsteps in the hallway made her smile before she even saw Vincent appear in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing that smile that still made her heart race. "How's the corporate world revolution going?" he asked, placing a cup beside her and leaning down to kiss the top of her head. "Very well, thank you," Isabella replied, saving her work and turning in her chair to look at him. "My advisor said my research on inclusion and diversity in the workplace has potential to be published." Vincent sat on the edge of the desk, his eyes shining with pride. "Of course it does. You're changing the way people think about human value and potential." Isabella laughed, still not completely used to the way Vincent always believed in her capabilities. "You're biased." "I'm realistic," he corrected. "And speaking of realism, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" Isabella asked, recognizing the tone Vincent used when he was planning something important. Vincent stood up and began pacing around the office, his hands gesturing as he spoke, a habit Isabella had learned to associate with his most ambitious ideas. "You know I'm expanding into the business consulting sector. Well, I'd like you to consider leading the human resources and organizational development department." Isabella blinked, certain she had heard wrong. "You want me to what?" "I want you to use everything you've learned, all your passion for helping people recognize their own worth and transform that into a career. I want you to help other companies create environments where people like you, talented people who have been underestimated, can flourish." Isabella stood up slowly, processing the magnitude of what Vincent was proposing. "Vincent, I haven't even finished my master's yet. I don't have real corporate experience. You have something better than traditional experience." Vincent interrupted, approaching her. "You have perspective. You understand what it means to be underestimated, ignored, judged by superficial characteristics. You can help companies see the potential they're wasting." Isabella felt tears stinging her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of an emotion so intense she couldn't name it. "Do you really believe I can do this?" Vincent took her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Isabella, You transformed my life simply by being who you are. You taught me that real strength comes from authenticity, that true beauty comes from kindness, that real success comes from lifting others up with you." He paused. "If you can transform a cynical man like me into someone who believes in true love, imagine what you can do for an entire company." In that moment, Isabella realized something profound. She was no longer the woman who had been delivered as payment for a debt. She was a woman who had found her own strength, her own worth, her own voice, and now she had the opportunity to use all of this to help others. "Yes," she said, her voice firm and clear. "Yes, I want to do this." The smile that lit up Vincent's face was like sunrise. He picked her up in his arms and spun her around, both laughing like children. "There's one more thing," Vincent said when he put her back down. "More?" Vincent knelt before her, and for a moment Isabella thought he was joking. But then he took a small box from his pocket. Not a ring box, but something smaller. "Vincent, what?" "Isabella Romano," he said, his voice loaded with emotion. "Do you want to have a baby with me?" Isabella felt as if the world had stopped. In the box was a small silver baby shoe, delicate and perfect. We're going to," she stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. "I want to build a family with you. I want to raise children who grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally, that they are valuable exactly as they are." Vincent stood up, taking her hands again. "I want our children to have a mother who teaches them that strength comes from within, that beauty comes from kindness, that they can be anything they dream of being." Isabella was crying openly now, but they were tears of such pure happiness that it seemed unreal. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want all of this with you." 6 months later, Isabella was standing in front of a different mirror, not the cruel mirror of her childhood that reflected only flaws, but the mirror in her new corporate office, where she was the director of human development at Romano Enterprises. Her belly was beginning to show the first signs of her pregnancy, and she had never felt more beautiful. Her first major presentation would be in an hour, a seminar on recognizing and developing underestimated human potential for CEOs of several important Chicago companies. It was exactly the kind of situation that would have terrified her years before, but now she felt prepared, confident, eager to share her message. Vincent appeared in the doorway, elegant in his dark suit, carrying a bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers from her wedding bouquet. "What's this for?" Isabella asked, accepting the flowers with a smile. "To celebrate the incredible woman you've become and everything you're still going to achieve," he replied, kissing her gently. "You know I didn't become anything, right?" Isabella said, arranging the lilies in a vase on her desk. "I was always this person. I just needed someone to help me see it." Vincent smiled, that smile that had become her favorite in the entire world. "And I needed someone to teach me that true love has nothing to do with appearances or conveniences, that it has to do with finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself." An hour later, Isabella was standing before a room full of powerful executives, many of whom probably would have judged her solely on appearance a few years before. But now, wearing an elegant suit that perfectly accommodated her early pregnancy, with her hair shining under the lights and her eyes radiating confidence, she commanded everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and firm, echoing through the room. "How many of you have ever lost exceptional talent because you judged a book by its cover?" The question hung in the air, and Isabella saw several uncomfortable faces in the audience. "My name is Isabella Romano, and 3 years ago I was considered inadequate for practically anything. Too fat, too shy, too different." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Today I'm here as director of one of Chicago's fastest growing consulting companies, about to graduate with honors from my master's program, and expecting my first child with the man who taught me that true worth has nothing to do with superficial standards." The room was completely silent, all eyes fixed on her. "The question isn't whether you have prejudices. We all do. The question is, how much extraordinary talent are you losing because that talent doesn't come packaged the way you expected?" For the next hour, Isabella presented data, case studies, and practical strategies for identifying and developing human potential that is often overlooked. She spoke about the importance of creating environments where people of all types can flourish, about how real diversity, not just demographic, but of perspectives and experiences, can transform a company. When she finished, the applause was warm and prolonged. Several executives approached afterward, interested in hiring her company's services. But the most significant moment came when a young woman approached, clearly an assistant or intern, with simple clothes and a posture that Isabella immediately recognized. "Mrs. Romano," the young woman said timidly, "I just wanted to thank you. Your presentation, it gave me hope. I've always felt like I didn't fit in the corporate world, that I wasn't the right kind of person to succeed." Isabella smiled, remembering herself a few years ago. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Chen." "Sarah, may I tell you a secret?" Isabella leaned slightly forward. "The corporate world needs people who don't fit the traditional mold. Those are the people who bring new perspectives, who ask questions no one else asks, who find solutions no one else sees." She handed Sarah her business card. "If you're interested in an internship opportunity at our company, contact me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You? You would do that?" "Sarah, someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else." That night, Isabella and Vincent were at home, relaxing in the living room that had become their favorite refuge. Isabella was nestled against Vincent on the sofa, their hands intertwined over her growing belly. "How was your first major presentation as an executive?" Vincent asked, kissing the top of her head. "It was perfect. Not because everything went according to plan, but because I finally understood what my purpose is." Isabella turned to look at him. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "That our story, the way we met, everything we went through, wasn't an accident. It was preparation. I needed to go through all that pain, all that rejection, to truly understand what it means to be underestimated. And you needed someone to show you that real worth has nothing to do with appearances." Vincent nodded slowly. "And now? Now we use our story to help others. You gave me the chance to discover who I really was. Now I can give that same chance to other people." Vincent pulled her closer, and Isabella felt the baby move for the first time, a small tremor that made her laugh with joy. "Our child will grow up in a very different world than we did," Vincent said, placing his hand over her belly. "Yes, a world where he or she will know from day one that they are loved unconditionally, that they are valuable exactly as they are, that they can be anything they dream of being." Isabella smiled. "And if our child ever feels different or inadequate, we'll be there to remind them that different is powerful, that inadequate by other people's standards means perfect for who you really are." 2 years later, Isabella was standing on the stage of the Chicago Convention Center before an audience of more than 1,000 people, holding her newly published book, Beyond the Surface, Discovering True Worth in a World Obsessed with Appearances. In the front row, Vincent was sitting with their 1-year-old daughter, Sophia, on his lap. The girl had her father's deep blue eyes and her mother's warm smile, and was clapping happily whenever she heard Isabella's voice through the microphone. 5 years ago, Isabella said to the audience, I was a woman who believed her worth was determined by her physical appearance. I had internalized so many negative messages about myself that I almost lost the opportunity to discover who I really was. She paused, looking at Vincent and Sophia. Today, I'm CEO of my own consulting company, author of a book that's helping people around the world recognize their own worth, mother of a beautiful daughter who will grow up knowing she's perfect exactly as she is, and wife of a man who taught me that true love sees beyond the surface. The applause was deafening, but Isabella barely heard it. Her eyes were fixed on her family, the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, and the daughter who represented a future where children would grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally. After the presentation, while signing books, a middle-aged woman approached with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Romano, I just wanted to thank you. My daughter is 16 and has been struggling with self-esteem issues. She thinks she's fat, ugly, inadequate. I bought your book for her, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter smile when she looked in the mirror. Isabella felt her heart warm. Tell her that a woman who has been exactly where she is now wants her to know she's perfect exactly as she is, and that her journey is just beginning. That night at home, after Sophia was asleep, Isabella and Vincent were in the garden where she used to read in the early days of their marriage. The bench Vincent had installed was still there, now accompanied by a swing where Sophia loved to play. "Do you remember?" Vincent said, pulling Isabella closer to him on the bench. "That first night when you told me it was obvious to anyone with eyes that you weren't attractive." Isabella laughed. "I remember being a very insecure woman saying very foolish things." "Well, I want you to know something." Vincent turned to look at her directly. "You were right about one thing. It is obvious to anyone with eyes. Obvious that you're the most beautiful woman who ever existed. Not because of how you look, but because of who you are. Because of the strength you found, the compassion you show, the way you light up any room you enter." Isabella felt familiar tears, tears of happiness that still surprised her with their intensity. "I love you, Vincent Romano. Thank you for helping me. I love you, Vincent Romano. Thank you for helping me find the woman I always was inside. I love you, Isabella Romano. Thank you for showing me that true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone perfect for you." As they kissed under the Chicago stars, Isabella reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. She had started as a woman who saw herself as inadequate, who had been literally delivered as payment for a debt. But through genuine love, respect, and support, she had discovered not only her own worth, but also her purpose. Now, she spent her days helping other people make the same discovery. Her company had become one of the most respected in Chicago, known for transforming corporate cultures and helping individuals reach their maximum potential. Her book was inspiring people around the world, and her family, Vincent and Sophia, was living proof that true love sees beyond the surface. Isabella Martinez, Romano's story had become more than a love story. It had become a story of transformation, of personal discovery, of how one person can change not only their own life, but the lives of countless other people. And it had all started with a man who chose to see beyond the surface, who treated a woman rejected by the world with the dignity and respect she deserved, and who loved her not despite her differences, but exactly because of who she was. Sometimes, Isabella thought, the happiest endings come from the most unlikely beginnings. And sometimes, being delivered to someone can actually be being delivered to your own destiny.